there's an article about Amber Geiger's conviction in murder of Botham Jean will stand. Appeals court in Dallas rules. From 3 hours ago today, I did a reading last night of a case, opinion, and a review where I discussed elements of the Geiger conviction without knowing this was ongoing today in Dallas. But just from what it says, first of all, it's worth acknowledging that they talk about a September 6th, 2018 incident and how she was convicted in 2019 on September 16th of 2019. There was a 9 year and 11 month treasury issue. It says that they refused to reduce her punishment to 2 years in prison and sentenced her instead to 10 years in prison, and that was maintained today. So they intend basically to take the bond they hooked up on her case and make her serve in prison during the entire time frame that bond with Treasury is in effect. All right, so that's good to know, right? Because part of what I contend was not brought up at all in the Amber Goiger case had to do with securities fraud, up to and potentially including securities fraud at one of the highest levels one can engage. And so the novelty of the case involving a female police officer that shoots a man that is African American and she believes is in her apartment as she enters the apartment, at least as the case is put into the media, is one element. But the other element is the understanding that he was also a licensed security broker that worked with a securities firm, and that the manner in which the case was characterized and the arguments were presented have very important implications for other people, including people like me, who, by the way, prior to this case, had been on the streets and twice just in the city of Dallas, had been transported in the back of a police vehicle without any real justification for putting me in the police vehicle, and in manners that were connected to my attempt to file a formal police report, which was not accepted, but then also told me or provided me with a consideration of whether or not to enter a police vehicle to be transported elsewhere in order to avoid being penalized in another manner after some allegation that I was doing something inappropriate in the stead of accepting that I was trying to file a report, right? And so I have a personal interest in seeing how this case and the implications of this case are addressed, right? And one of the things it says, I haven't read the opinion, this is the initial assessment, right? I open up my computer, I walk into or I enter into my virtual space, and this is the first thing that I'm confronted with. It says that there were three judges, issued a 23-page judgment on Thursday, which would be today. The justices did not agree that evidence supported a conviction of criminally negligent homicide rather than murder, and they pointed to Goiger's own testimony that she intended to kill. And then it has a quote. That she was mistaken as to Jean's status as a resident in his own apartment or a burglar in hers does not change her mental state from intentional or knowing to criminally negligent, the judges wrote. We decline to rely on Goiger's misperception of the circumstances leading to her mistaken beliefs as a basis to reform the jury's verdict in light of the direct evidence of her intent to kill. Now, I read this and I'm concerned because of the trigger word, intent to kill. And also understanding she's a police officer who is required to carry a firearm as part of her job. So I say to myself, well, actually, is there not already law established that determines that if one understands and believes they're in their own home, that there are laws that actually address that matter? So the first thing I do is I look up castle law and intent to kill. That's what I put in the search term, and there comes up information about castle doctrine. But here's the interesting thing. The first reference to this is the Texas Penal Code dated for September 11th, right? But the second one is the Castle Doctrine in California. California's Castle Doctrine only allows for the use of force in self-defense if the person defending himself had a reasonable fear of imminent peril of death or great bodily injury to himself, his family, or member of the household. So the first one is Texas, dated for September 11th, by the way. The second one is California. But here's the very compelling factor. Deadly force permissible under Castle Doctrine in Mississippi. If you click on it, Daily Journal. Deadly force permissible under Castle Doctrine in Mississippi. What's it say? In Mississippi Code of 1972, Section 97-3-15, the law explains the circumstances under which homicide is considered legally justifiable. The law, often called the Castle Doctrine, cites 4 instances in which it is justifiable for a public officer to kill someone, and 2 instances where a civilian can, in an act of defense, kill someone. Then it says, Portion E. Right. I see. So, under the state of Texas, there is a specific consideration of it. It says Texas Penal Code, Section 9.31, governing the justified use of non-deadly force, and Section 9.32, governing the justified use of deadly force, are our state's version of the Castle Doctrine. So that means within the state of Texas, if one invokes the Castle Doctrine, there is both use of non-deadly force as well as use of deadly force. So it's one of these ironic things that even if there was a jury consideration, and for whatever reason the prosecutor decided to present an argument in a certain way, and the defense decided to present the argument in a certain way, then when the judges opine, including during an appeal, is they say here, this specific kind of reference point that does not change her mental state from intentional or knowing to criminally negligent. So does not have to do with the direct evidence of her intent to kill. Well, under the law of the Castle Doctrine, in an invocation of an understanding of the Castle Doctrine, if you enter your home and you understand that there is somebody in your home that has the intent to do you bodily harm up to and including potentially fatal harm, then there is no preclusion on intending to assure that that person is rendered completely incapable of following through. So there is that particular understanding. It's characterized by saying that he was on his couch eating ice cream. If you're a woman entering your house and a man is on your couch eating ice cream, and he is somebody on your couch in your house eating ice cream. But there's the other implication, which is that I contend this is not necessarily just about her believing, because she was entering her own house and somebody was in there. I believe it was more about somebody was driving around her vehicle. And she understood she was entering the place where her vehicle was supposed to be parked. And so now we get into a different consideration of what the implications of what they're saying are. If you understand somebody's hijacked your vehicle and they're driving you around because they have a securities license that gets them access to securities related to you and your identity, and you catch them in your vehicle at the time, what is this to say? Well, you can disable them, but you cannot engage them with the intent to kill. The other option available, well, her partner, who happens to be a man, by the way, says he would have taken a position of cover. You mean an alias license? And uses police radio to call for help if he were in a similar situation. Really? So what does that mean? You enter your home, you find a man on your couch eating ice cream. What are you going to do? Take a picture with your cell phone? Is that what you would do? See, I mean, I think these are very legitimate questions, and this would be my first reaction, because I would hope that if I actually had a partner that was in a situation like this with me, that his response would be, what? That he was going to take a position of cover? What was she supposed to do? She walks into the house, a man is there on the couch, eating ice cream, in her apartment. What is she supposed to do? Run out the door and call you to call in backup? I'm just asking. I'm honestly asking, because let me tell you what happens. I'm leaving, and a man follows me down the street, and he runs and he jumps and he grabs me from behind and starts assaulting me. And I have to run into another place and wait until he leaves. And at some point, after the third time of him doing something like this, I call the police officers to actually file a report because he followed me back to the place I had to go in order to escape him, and he's on site. And the cops are there. And they see him there and they see me. And there's a big crowd of people. And I say, I want to file a police report. And they put me in the back of the car and take me somewhere I was on my way to beforehand, before that man followed me and threatened me with physical violence. I want to know, what would you do in that situation if you considered me somebody on par with the kind of people that have to deal with the consideration of whether or not your first response is going to be that you understand that there is this law called the Castle Doctrine, which is a specific understanding of what it means to be safe in your own home, to be protected in your own person and property, right? I mean, if you're a homeless woman on the street and somebody offers you a ride, I guess that's different. Or is it? I'm just asking, right? Because this has been going on for several years. And I think that a big call was missed with this. I think that there were a lot of people, including women, that aren't in law enforcement, that actually needed for this case to be exposed for what it's really about. And in the course of this, what I'm seeing, again, by the way, is the second time that judges in the state of Texas have taken a woman that fits a specific kind of racial demographic profile and has a specific kind of expertise, in this case law enforcement, but in a previous case it had to do with a journalist that was alleged to have been impinging upon laws connected to confidential information when it came to reporting, and setting up finance deals in connection with derivatives associated with the case before they actually got to the point. See, if you believe her when she says she actually believes she was in her home, then what the judges said makes no sense. But if you're talking about something else as a sort of derivative for what you actually understand was going on, then why did they allow for her to be sentenced to 10 years in connection with a 10-year treasury note? Was that intentional? Was it intentionally orchestrated and lined up to make sure somebody else got to use her prison term as leverage for some sort of kickback? I contend it is. And I contend, if nothing else, it goes back to a failure and refusal to take a report on an incident from April 24th of 2018, including when I was in the back of your vehicle.